The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After decades of faster-than-light travel and building colonies on 17 worlds across 3 star systems, Earth received a message that would change everything. The Galactic Council, a government made up of 47 alien species, ordered humanity to send a representative to their central station. This station floated near a dead star called Valaxis Prime, and it was the heart of galactic power. Admiral Catherine Price stood in the observation room of the diplomatic ship, Dawn of Terra. She watched through the window as the council station grew larger and larger. The station was massive, bigger than any city on Earth. It's built from metals and materials that human scientists could not even name. Beside her stood Ambassador Daniel Morrison, a man who had spent 30 years preparing for a moment exactly like this one. He was calm and steady, and he carried with him the hopes of 12 billion human beings. "They have given us coordinates for Docking Bay 7, Lieutenant Kevin Shaw said from the navigation console. His voice was tense. No escort ships. No welcome party. Their transmissions are cold and formal. Ambassador Morrison straightened his diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance one more time. "That is to be expected, Lieutenant. We are the new species here. We are the outsiders. We must earn their respect through patience and good faith." The Dawn of Terra glided into the docking bay, and the crew felt the slight bump as the ship connected to the station. Morrison took a deep breath and led his small delegation through the airlock. What waited for them was not what they had hoped for. The council chamber was a vast room shaped like an amphitheater. Seats rose up in circles all around, and in those seats sat the representatives of species that humanity had never seen before. Some were made of crystal that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Some were clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields. They spoke through vibrations that the translation devices struggled to interpret. There were insect-like creatures with many legs and hard shells, and they clicked their jaws together in what the translator said was laughter. At the center of this chamber, on a raised platform, sat High Chancellor Vorthox. He was a serpent-like being, long and covered in scales that changed color with every word he spoke. When he was calm, his scales were blue and green. When he was angry, they shifted to red and orange. Right now, looking down at the human delegation, his scales were a deep and threatening crimson. "You are the humans," Vorthax said, and his voice was like the hiss of steam escaping from a pipe. "The species that breeds like insects and consumes resources like a disease spreading across healthy flesh. We have watched you. We have seen you spread across 3 star systems in only 200 years. This speed of growth is dangerous. This rate of expansion cannot be allowed to continue." Ambassador Morrison did not flinch. He had prepared for hostility. He had studied every culture, every species, every historical record that humanity had been able to gather. He knew that the Council feared change, and humanity represented the greatest change the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. High Chancellor Morrison said, keeping his voice respectful but firm, "We come in peace. We seek only friendship and fair trade. Humanity has much to offer the galactic community. We are inventors, explorers, dreamers. We want to learn from you, and we hope you might learn from us." The chamber erupted in sounds that could only be described as mocking laughter. Species that had existed for millions of years, that had built empires when humans were still living in caves, saw no value in anything humanity could offer. To them, humans were children playing with dangerous toys. Children needed to be controlled. Vorthax raised one of his many arms, and the chamber fell silent. His scales shifted through several colors before settling on a cold, icy blue. "You will accept our terms," the Chancellor declared. "There will be no negotiation. Humanity will stop all colonization immediately. You will give us your faster-than-light technology. You will accept a permanent position as observers with no voting rights in any council matter. And you will pay tribute of 30% of everything your worlds produce to the council treasury each year." Morrison felt his heart beating faster, but he kept his face calm. "High Chancellor, I will send these terms to Earth. Our government will review them carefully. However, I must tell you honestly that humanity does not respond well to demands made without discussion." Several of the alien delegates shifted in their seats. Some of the younger species, those who had themselves faced the Council's heavy hand, watched Morrison with something like respect. No one spoke to the High Chancellor this way. No one dared. Vorthax's scales flashed bright red, and his eyes, dark and cold like the space between stars, fixed on the human ambassador. That was not a request, human. That was a verdict. You may pretend to have a choice, but you do not. Accept these terms, or face the consequences. The Council has destroyed species far older and far more powerful than yours. Do not test our patience. Morrison stood his ground. He looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching him. He saw fear in some of them, hatred in others, and curiosity in a few. He knew that whatever happened next would shape humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. I understand your position, High Chancellor, Morrison said carefully. And I understand the power of the Council. But I also know my people. Humanity has faced extinction many times. We have survived ice ages that covered our world. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that nearly destroyed us completely. We are still here. We are still standing. And we did not survive all of that just to bow down to anyone, no matter how powerful they claimed to be. The silence in the chamber was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the gas beans stopped their constant motion. Vorthax stared at Morrison for a long moment. Then he smiled. If the expression on his serpent face could be called a smile, it was not a friendly expression. You have spirit, human. I almost admire it. But spirit will not save you. Spirit will not stop our fleets. You have 3 of your Earth months to accept our terms. After that, we will come to your little worlds and teach you the meaning of obedience. Morrison nodded once. I will inform my government of your generous timeline. He turned and walked out of the chamber with his delegation behind him. His back was straight and his steps were steady, but inside his mind was racing. He knew that he had just made powerful enemies. He knew that war might be coming. But he also knew that he could not have answered any other way. As the Dawn of Terra undocked from the station and began its journey back to Earth, Morrison stood alone in his quarters. He looked out at the stars, countless points of light scattered across the darkness. And he wondered how many of those lights would become battlefields before this was over. We tried peace, he whispered to himself. God help us all if they force us to try the alternative. For 3 months, Ambassador Daniel Morrison remained on the Council station. He refused to leave, refused to give up on the possibility of peace. Every day he met with different delegates, different species, trying to find common ground. He smiled when they insulted him. He remained calm when they threatened him. He kept pushing for negotiation, for understanding, for any path that did not lead to war. Some of the younger species began to respect him. The Villani, a race of bird-like beings with beautiful feathers and sad eyes, had been members of the Council for only a few thousand years. They remembered what it felt like to be the outsiders, the newcomers, the ones that nobody trusted. Senator Kirith of the Villani met Morrison in secret one night in a quiet corner of the station. The bird creature looked around nervously, making sure no one was watching them. You must leave this place, Kirith whispered, his feathers ruffling with anxiety. The old powers have already decided what will happen to your people. They fear what humanity might become. They fear your energy, your creativity, your refusal to accept limits. They have decided to break you before you grow too strong. Morrison shook his head slowly. I cannot abandon my mission. Earth is counting on me. 12 billion people are hoping I can find a way to avoid bloodshed. Kirith's eyes were filled with sorrow. Then I am sorry, Ambassador. I am sorry for what is coming. Back on Earth, Secretary General Patricia Lang was not sitting idle. She was a woman of 60 years, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much suffering. She had risen through the government during the Martian uprising. When the colony had tried to break away from Earth, she had held things together during the Belt Wars. When the asteroid miners had fought for their rights, she knew what conflict looked like, and she could smell it coming from across the galaxy. They are stalling, General Marcus Webb told her during a secret meeting in the underground command center beneath the city of Geneva. The room was deep below the surface, protected by layers of rock and metal, designed to survive anything. Our intelligence suggests the Council is moving their warships toward our solar system. They are hiding them at the edge, where our sensors have trouble seeing. How long before they can attack? Lang asked. Her voice was calm, but her hands were tight on the table. 6 weeks. Maybe less. She turned to Admiral Nathan Cross, the commander of Earth's defense fleet. He was a tall maw, with broad shoulders and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Begin preparations quietly. I want every ship ready for battle within 30 days. But do it without making noise. We cannot give them a reason to attack before we are ready. Cross nodded. Understood, Madam Secretary. On the council station, Ambassador Morrison received a message summoning him to the main chamber. He assumed it was another round of talks, another chance to argue for peace. He dressed carefully in his best diplomatic uniform. He pinned the small Earth flag to his chest, right over his heart. He walked into the great amphitheater with his head held high and hope still alive in his heart. He never walked out. The chamber was packed with every member of the council. Every species, every delegate, every aide and assistant. They filled the seats, rising up in circles. Thousands of alien eyes, all focused on the single human standing in the center of the floor. Hi, Chancellor Vorthax looked down from his platform, his scales shifting through colors that Morrison had never seen before. There was no pretense of negotiation this time. There was no discussion. This was something else entirely. Ambassador Daniel Morrison of Earth, Vorthax announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. You've been found guilty of spying against the Galactic Council. You have been found guilty of trying to start rebellions among species that belong to us. You have been found guilty of threatening the peace and order of galactic civilization. Morrison felt his blood turn cold. This is wrong. These charges are lies. I have done nothing but work for peace. I have spoken only of cooperation and friendship. The sentence, Vorthax continued as if Morrison had not spoken, is death. Before Morrison could react, massive guards seized his arms. They were from a species built like mountains, with 4 arms and skin like armor. Morrison struggled, but he might as well have been fighting against solid rock. The execution was broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. Every species, every world, every ship received the signal. They wanted everyone to see what happened to those who defied the Council. They used a device called a neural disruptor. It was designed to cause maximum pain before finally stopping the brain. Morrison screamed as fire seemed to burn through every nerve in his body. The agony lasted for minutes that felt like hours. His last words, transmitted directly to Earth, were these: "Tell them we never surrendered. Tell them we never will." And then he was gone. Secretary General Patricia Lang watched the transmission in the war room beneath Geneva. Her advisors stood around her, their faces pale with horror and grief. Some of the younger officers were crying. Some of the older ones looked like they wanted to vomit. Lang's face showed nothing. She was completely still, completely silent. But those who knew her well could see the fire burning behind her eyes. They could see the cold fury building inside her like a storm waiting to break. She stood slowly. She looked at the frozen image of Morrison's body on the screen. She looked at it for a long time. Madam Secretary General Webb said quietly, "What are your orders?" Lang turned to face her command staff. When she spoke, her voice was steady and hard as steel. "Activate the Annihilation Protocol." The words hung in the air. Everyone in the room understood what they meant. The Annihilation Protocol was humanity's darkest secret. A plan created for the worst possible situation. A plan that no one had ever wanted to use. "Madam Secretary," Admiral Cross said carefully, "once we start down this path, there is no turning back. This means total war." Lang looked at him with eyes that had become cold and hard. "They murdered our ambassador on sacred ground. They broadcast his death like entertainment. They think this will make us afraid. They think this will make us submit." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was like ice. "They have no idea what they have just started." She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her commanders. Humanity did not survive 10,000 years of struggle just to kneel before anyone. "Send the signal." Wake up every ship, every soldier, every factory. We are going to war, and we are not going to stop until justice is done." The room exploded into action. Orders were sent across the solar system. The machines of war began to move. And somewhere among the stars, the Galactic Council celebrated their victory over the primitive humans, completely unaware of the storm that was about to fall upon them: the annihilation. Protocol was humanity's darkest and most closely guarded secret. It had been created during the early days of space travel, when humans first realized that they might not be alone in the universe. The plan was simple in concept, but massive in scale. It was designed for one situation only: a complete and total war for human survival. Within hours of Ambassador Morrison's execution, encrypted messages flew across the solar system and beyond to every human colony. The codes were recognized instantly. Factory managers who had spent their entire careers making civilian goods suddenly received new orders. Mining operations in the asteroid belt began pulling rare metals from the rocks at triple their normal speed. And in the outer edges of the solar system, hidden in the cold darkness where no one ever looked, 7 secret shipyards came alive. These shipyards had been building warships in silence for over 50 years. Ships that officially did not exist. Ships that were designed for only one purpose: Secretary General. Patricia Lang addressed the people of Earth from the steps of the United Earth Parliament in Geneva. Billions of people across 17 worlds watched her face on their screens. Her voice was carried to every corner of human civilization. "Citizens of Earth and all human colonies," she began, her voice strong and clear, "today we witnessed an act of murder that demands an answer. Ambassador Daniel Morrison went to the Galactic Council in peace. He carried only words and hope. They answered him with torture and death. They broadcast his murder for all the galaxy to see. They thought this would break us. They thought this would make us afraid." She paused and looked directly into the cameras. They were wrong. The crowd gathered before her began to cheer. The sound spread across the planet as billions of voices joined together. "We did not seek this war," Lang continued. "We extended our hand in friendship, and they cut it off. From this moment forward, the human race is in a state of total war. We will not negotiate. We will not surrender. We will not stop until every person responsible for this crime faces justice. This is not about revenge. This is about showing the galaxy that humanity will never bow down to tyrants." Admiral Nathan Cross took command of the newly formed 1st Expeditionary Fleet. His flagship was the carrier Resolve of Earth, the largest warship humanity had ever built. It was 2 kilometers long, carrying 200 fighter craft and weapons powerful enough to crack open a moon. The ship had been hidden in the outer system for 3 years, waiting for a day that everyone hoped would never come. "Our first target is the Council's forward base at Nexus Station," Cross told his officers during the mission briefing. The holographic display showed the enemy position, a massive station surrounded by defense platforms and warships. "Intelligence tells us they are using this base to prepare their invasion fleet. They plan to attack Earth in 3 weeks. We are going to make sure that does not happen." Lieutenant Commander Rachel Norton, one of the fleet's best tactical officers, studied the display with worried eyes. "Sir, they have more than 300 ships defending that station. We have 112. The numbers are not in our favor." Cross smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. "Lieutenant Commander, our ancestors once fought entire armies with nothing but pointed sticks. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They climbed mountains that everyone said could not be climbed. We are their children. Bad odds just mean we have to be smarter and fight harder." The fleet jumped into the Nexus system on a cold Tuesday morning, Earth time. They emerged from faster-than-light travel in a perfect formation, every ship exactly where it was supposed to be. The Council defenders had expected to wait weeks before any human response. They had expected fear and confusion. What they got was a wall of steel and fire appearing out of nowhere. The Battle of Nexus Station lasted 7 hours. It was chaos and thunder and death on a scale that defied imagination. The Council forces fought hard. They were experienced warriors who had won hundreds of battles against dozens of species. But they had never faced anything like humanity. Human ships were faster. Human pilots were more aggressive. Human weapons were designed by engineers who understood that. Sometimes the best way to defend yourself was to attack with everything you had, the railgun. Batteries of the resolve of Earth fired solid. Metal rods at nearly the speed of light. These simple weapons, just chunks of tungsten moving very fast, tore through Council shields that had stopped energy beams for millennia. The alien admirals could not understand it. Their shields were designed to absorb and redirect energy. No one had ever thought to throw rocks at them. Human fighter pilots flew their small craft into gaps in the enemy formation that should have been impossible to survive. They twisted and turned and spun through fields of debris and weapons fire, hitting critical systems with perfect accuracy. When one pilot's weapons failed, he flew his damaged fighter directly into the bridge of a Council destroyer. His last transmission was simply, "For Morrison." When the battle ended, the Council had lost 147 ships. Nexus Station was a broken ruin, fires burning in its shattered corridors. Humanity had lost 38 vessels and over 4,000 lives. Admiral Cross stood on his bridge, watching the wreckage drift through space. His face was tired, but his eyes were bright. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Open channel, all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." He took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "This is Admiral Nathan Cross of the United Earth Fleet. You murdered our ambassador. You thought that would frighten us. Instead, you have awakened something that should have been left sleeping. This battle is just the beginning. We are coming. We will not stop. We will not rest. Every species that stands with the Council against us will share in what is coming. Every species that wishes to join us in freedom will find us to be loyal friends. The choice is yours." He paused, then added, "We never surrender. We never will." The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. On hundreds of worlds, beings of every shape and size heard the words of the human admiral. The old powers felt something they had not felt in thousands of years: fear. And the young species, the ones who had lived under the Council's boot for so long, felt something else. They felt hope. The war that followed the Battle of Nexus Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity did not fight as a single army moving in straight lines. They fought like water flowing around rocks, finding every crack, every weakness. Every opening that the Council left unguarded, human ships appeared in systems where they were not expected. They destroyed supply convoys carrying food and fuel to Council fleets. They raided mining operations that provided rare metals for Council weapons. They attacked communication stations and left entire sectors unable to call for help. The border regions of Council space became a nightmare of fear and uncertainty. Where every shadow might hide a human warship, General Sandra Perry led the ground forces during the campaign to free occupied worlds. She was a small woman with short dark hair and a voice that could make soldiers run through walls. Her troops loved her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. She was always first through the door, always at the front of the charge. The planet Thraxis 7 had been under Council control for 3,000 years. The Council had built a massive command center there, fortress from which they directed military operations across an entire region of space. General Perry was given orders to take it. Her troops landed at night, their dropships coming down through heavy rain and enemy fire. They hit the ground running and did not stop. Block by block, building by building, they pushed through the alien city toward the command center. Perry fought alongside her soldiers, her rifle never cooling down, her voice shouting orders through the chaos. The Thraxian people, the native species of the planet, watched from their homes as the battle raged through their streets. They were six-limbed beings with soft gray skin and large dark eyes. For 3,000 years, they had served the Council, working in the factories and mines, never allowed to govern themselves, never allowed to dream of freedom. When the smoke cleared and the Council forces surrendered, Elder Cormax of the Thraxians came to meet General Perry in the ruins of the command center. The old being walked slowly, supported by two younger Thraxians. His eyes were wet with tears that he did not try to hide. "Why do you do this?" Cormax asked, his voice shaking. "We are not your people. You owe us nothing. Your soldiers died here, on our world, fighting our oppressors. Why? Perry wiped blood from a cut on her forehead. Her uniform was torn and burned in several places. She was exhausted beyond words. But she smiled at the old alien with genuine warmth. Because no one deserves to live in chains, she said simply. Because that is who we are. Humanity does not only fight for itself, we fight for anyone who needs help. Cormac stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something that his people had not done in 3,000 years. He straightened his bent back and raised his head high. Then the Thraxian people will stand with humanity, he declared. Tell your leaders that they have found allies here. News of Thraxus 7 spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Council tried to control the information, tried to make it seem like nothing important had happened. But the truth has a way of finding light, the Villani. The bird-like beings whose Senator Kirith had warned Ambassador Morrison before his death, announced that they were leaving the Council. They pledged their support to humanity and began sending ships and supplies to help the war effort. Their decision shocked the galaxy because the Villani has always been considered loyal members of the Council, the crystalline beings of the Arcturus system, who everyone thought were too fragile and peaceful to fight, revealed a secret they had kept for centuries. Hidden beneath their beautiful cities were weapons factories that had been producing arms for 1,000 years, waiting for someone brave enough to challenge the old powers. They too joined humanity's cause. One by one, species that had suffered under Council rule for millennia began to rise. Some sent warriors. Some sent ships. Some sent only messages of support. But all of them turned their eyes toward humanity and saw something they had never seen before, a species that refused to accept defeat. On Earth, Secretary General Patricia Lang coordinated the growing alliance from the war room beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the war began. Her hair had turned completely white. Her face showed every one of her 60 years. But her mind remained sharp as a blade. Madame Secretary, her aide reported one morning, High Chancellor Vorthax is requesting a ceasefire. He wants to negotiate. Lang did not look up from the tactical display showing the positions of human and allied fleets. No. He is offering to return Ambassador Morrison's remains. He is offering to pay reparations. He says the Council made a mistake. No, her voice was ice. Madame Secretary, perhaps we should at least listen to what they want to offer. The war has been going on for 2 years. Our people are tired. Our resources are strained. Lang finally looked up. Her eyes burned with a cold fire that made her aides step back. They had their chance for peace. They chose to murder Daniel Morrison and broadcast it like entertainment. They chose to threaten our children and our future. There will be no ceasefire until the Council is dissolved. There will be no negotiation until every person responsible for what happened faces trial. They started this war. We will finish it. The war continued for another full year. Commander Kyle Bennett led some of the most daring operations of the conflict. He was a young officer, only 32 years old, but he had a gift for tactics that bordered on genius. His strike force of 12 frigates attacked the Council's main shipyard at Valex's Minor, facing over 100 enemy vessels. It should have been suicide. The numbers were impossible, but Bennett found a way. He used the gravity of a nearby gas giant to hide his approach. He timed his attack to coincide with a shift change in the enemy patrol schedule. He targeted the shipyard's power generators with perfect precision. Causing a chain reaction that destroyed the entire facility, his force escaped with only 3 ships lost. The Council lost their primary shipyard and 47 warships that were under construction. When asked later how he had accomplished the impossible, Bennett simply shrugged. We are human, he said. The impossible is what we do before breakfast. 3 years after the execution of Ambassador Morrison, humanity and its allies had broken the back of the Galactic Council. The old powers were scattered and desperate. Their fleets were in ruins. Their subject species were in open revolt, and the human war machine, far from being exhausted, seemed to grow stronger with each passing month. The time had come to end it. The final assault on Valex's Prime was the largest military operation in human history. Admiral Nathan Cross commanded a combined fleet of human and allied vessels numbering more than 2,000 ships. They gathered at the edge of the system, a massive armada that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space, blocking out the stars behind them. Cross stood on the bridge of the Resolve of Earth, looking out at the fleet he commanded. Behind him stood officers from a dozen different species: the feathered Villani, the crystalline Arcturans, the gray-skinned Thraxians, and many others who had joined humanity's cause. They had all lost something to the Council. They had all come for justice. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Rachel Nordo N said. She had been promoted 3 times during the war and was now Cross's most trusted officer. "The Council has everything they have left defending that station. This is their last stand." Cross nodded slowly. "Then let us make sure it is a stand they will remember forever." The fleet jumped into the Valaxis system as one, emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. The neutron star at the heart of the system cast strange light across the warships, making them look like ghosts rising from the darkness. At the center of it all hung the Council Station, the seat of galactic power for 10,000 years. High Chancellor Vorthax watched from the observation deck as his empire crumbled around him. The fleets he had commanded were scattered across the galaxy, most of them destroyed, the rest running for their lives. His allies had abandoned him one by one, making secret deals with humanity to save themselves. The species he had once mocked as vermin were at his doorstep, and they carried fire. "Order the garrison to surrender," his aide begged, falling to his knees. "Perhaps they will show mercy. Perhaps if we give ourselves up without more fighting, they will spare our lives." Vorthax's scales flickered through a dozen colors: fear, anger, despair, and finally, a dark resignation. Mercy. "We showed them what we thought of mercy when we executed their ambassador. We made sure they watched every moment of his pain. They will not forget. They cannot forget." The station's defenses held for 6 hours. Human and allied ships pounded the shields with everything they had, while the Council threw wave after wave of defenders at them. Fighters dueled in the shadow of the neutron star. Capital ships traded massive blows that lit up the system like artificial suns. When the shields finally fell, human Marines began boarding operations. They came in assault shuttles that dodged through the wreckage, landing on the station's hull and cutting their way inside. Major Christina Hayes led the primary assault team, the one tasked with reaching the Council chamber itself. Hayes was 43 years old and had been a Marine for 20 years. She had fought in the Martian Uprising and the Belt Wars. She had seen combat on a dozen worlds during this war. Nothing frightened her anymore. Her soldiers moved through the station's corridors with grim determination. They encountered Council guards at every turn and dealt with them quickly and efficiently. They were not cruel, but they were not gentle either. Every Marine remembered the transmission of Ambassador Morrison's execution. Every one of them carried that memory like a weight on their shoulders. They reached the Council chamber and blasted open the massive doors. Inside, High Chancellor Vorthax sat on his throne, surrounded by his personal guards. The guards were massive creatures, built like walking tanks. Armed with the most advanced weapons the Council possessed, the guards looked at the human soldiers. They looked at the bodies of their comrades scattered through the corridors behind them. They looked at the cold determination in human eyes that had seen too much war to feel fear anymore. They dropped their weapons. Vorthax did not move. He sat perfectly still on his throne, his scales shifting slowly through shades of gray. He watched as Major Hayes walked toward him, her rifle pointed at his chest. "So," the Chancellor said, his voice tired and empty, "the vermin have inherited the galaxy? Tell me, human, how does it feel to become everything you claim to hate?" Hayes removed her helmet. Her face was covered in sweat and ash, and a thin line of blood ran down from a cut above her eye. She looked at the creature who had ordered the death of Ambassador Morrison, who had started a war that killed billions, who had ruled the galaxy through fear and cruelty. "We are not vermin," she said quietly. "We never were. We are humanity. And you should have known better than to harm our people." Secretary General Patricia Lang arrived on the station 3 days later for the formal surrender ceremony. The Great Hall of the Council, the very room where Ambassador Morrison had been murdered, was now filled with human soldiers and representatives of allied species. Vorthax and the surviving council members were brought before her in chains. Not energy restraints or force fields, but actual metal chains. The same kind of chains that the council had used to bind subjugated species for thousands of years. Lang had insisted on this detail. She stood at the center of the hall, a small woman in a simple gray uniform, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. She looked at Vorthax with eyes that had seen too much grief to hold any anger anymore. "Hi, Chancellor Vorthax," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "You stand accused of crimes against humanity and crimes against countless species throughout this galaxy. You ordered the execution of a peaceful ambassador. You planned the invasion and destruction of Earth. You have ruled through fear and cruelty for far too long." Vorthax lifted his head, and for a moment his old arrogance returned. "I did what was necessary to maintain order in the galaxy. I've kept the peace for 10,000 years. Order." Lang's voice was sharp as a knife. "You maintained power. There is a difference. True peace does not require chains. True order does not require murder." She turned to face the assembled crowd, beings of every shape and size who had come to witness this moment. "The Galactic Council is dissolved from this day forward. It is finished. In its place, we will build the United Galactic Alliance. Every species, regardless of how old or young, how powerful or weak, will have an equal voice. Disputes will be resolved through negotiation, not violence. No species will live in fear of destruction for simply existing." She looked back at Vorthax and the other prisoners. "You will face trial for your crimes. All of you. And justice will be done. Not revenge, but justice. Because that is who we are. That is who humanity chooses to be." In the years that followed, the galaxy was transformed. The United Galactic Alliance established fair trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. Species that had been slaves for millennia tasted freedom for the first time, and humanity, once dismissed as vermin, became the heart of a new galactic order built on cooperation instead of domination. A monument was built on the station, now renamed Hope Station, at the exact spot where Ambassador Morrison had died. It showed him standing tall, the Earth flag in his hand, with his final words carved into the base in 100 different languages. "We never surrendered. We never will." Admiral Nathan Cross, now retired, visited the monument on the 5th anniversary of the war's end. He stood in silence for a long time, remembering friends lost and battles fought and the terrible price of freedom. A young officer approached him. "Admiral, what made us different? How did we win when so many others failed?" Cross looked at the monument, at the face of the ambassador, who had died rather than submit. The council made a mistake. They thought killing one man would frighten us into obedience. They did not understand that hurting one of us only makes the rest of us angry. They did not understand that humanity has faced extinction before and survived. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived wars that nearly destroyed our world. We are still here because we refuse to give up. We are still here because when someone pushes us, we push back harder. He placed his hand on the monument. "Oh, they killed one man. In doing so, they woke up a species of 12 billion who would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. That was their mistake. That will always be our answer to anyone who thinks they can break us." The young officer nodded slowly, understanding filling his eyes. "We never surrender." Cross smiled, and in that smile was all the pride and pain and hope of the human race. "We never will."